Good evening. It is 7 p.m. or a little past, so I'm calling tonight's Rent Stabilization Commission meeting to order. We'd like to start by first acknowledging that the land on which we gather, currently known as the City of West Hollywood, is the occupied, unceded seized land of the Gabrielino Tonga and the Gabrielino Quiche people. Commissioner Mart, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Well, welcome to those that are attending in person and those that are watching online this evening. Madam Secretary, may we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Commissioner Bass?
Here.
Commissioner Kirpies?
Here.
Commissioner Martz?
Here.
Commissioner Rory?
Present.
Commissioner Topshin?
Here.
Vice Chair Moore?
Here.
Chair Wright?
Present. We have quorum. If everyone's had a chance to review tonight's agenda, I will entertain a motion.
So move. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Madam Secretary, roll call, please.
Commissioner Bass?
Aye.
Commissioner Kirpies?
Aye.
Commissioner Martz?
Aye.
Commissioner Rory?
Aye.
Commissioner Topshin?
Aye.
Vice Chair Moore?
Aye.
Chair Wright?
Aye. All right, if everyone's had a chance to review the minutes from our prior meeting, I will entertain a motion for approval.
I move to approve as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Madam Secretary, roll call, please.
Commissioner Bass?
Aye.
Commissioner Kirpies?
Aye.
Commissioner Martz?
Aye.
Commissioner Rory?
Aye.
Commissioner Topshin?
Aye.
Vice Chair Moore?
Aye.
Chair Wright?
Aye. All right, Madam Secretary, are there any public comments this evening?
Yes, we have 2 public commenters in chambers.
All right. I want to inform the public that any items not on tonight's agenda, we won't be able to make any comments on. There's also been an increase in attacks in many cities around the state, whereby public commentators have been calling into public comment lines at city council meetings and forcing communities to hear vile, hateful, and racist and anti-Semitic public comments. We anticipate these types of comments at our meeting tonight based on the number of cities that have experienced these attacks. I would like to tell the public and staff that while we may sometimes seem divided on some political issues, West Hollywood is united against hate. Staff has provided us signs that my colleagues, staff, and the public may use to express that we are united against hate. If you hear a comment that is hateful, you may hold up your sign, or you may leave the room or turn down your volume at home. You are not required to endure hateful speech that offends decency and our own core values. Please let the sign show that we are united against hate, and this type of speech does not reflect our values. While these disruptors may be taking advantage of the opportunity to speak to our community because we currently provide for telephonic comments, they will not break our spirit. We are united against hate. Each of the speakers this evening will have 3 minutes to speak. When you begin, please state your name, your city of residence, and your preferred pronouns. The first speaker may come to the podium.
Elena?
Hi, good evening, honorable commissioners. So happy to see you here today. I was working with a few of you before. My name is Elena Goldenberg. I'm gonna read from my phone. I'm a resident of City of West Hollywood. I'm here tonight to speak to the Rent Stabilization Commission regarding an inclusionary housing unit located at 1050 North Edinburgh Avenue, apartment 102, where I lived for 13 years. I moved out of this unit in December 2018 because of the fire. I was told by Rent Stabilization Department that I would be able to move back in after renovation, but after several inquiries throughout the years since I moved out, there was no information about the unit from the Rent Stabilization Department. Recently, my former neighbor informed me that this unit was purchased, renovated, and is occupied by the owner's son. My question is, has the city of West Hollywood lost this low-income inclusionary housing unit? Is anyone from the city rent stabilization department can answering this question to me and the city low-income residents? I know that we have a big problem with the low-income units. It's a huge list of people who are waiting for that, for this unit and for other units. And because it was happened to me, my question also is any other cases like that that we don't know? I'm sure if I wouldn't raise this question, you would never know that you lost or losing this unit. It was a very beautiful unit, but a thing happened. And so I'd like to hear answer. I've been in rent stabilization several times by person. I call, and they always told me that, oh, the person who was talking to me told me that, I'm not, cannot answer you to this question. It's some other person, they will call you. They never did, unfortunately. I know that rent stabilization is very good department, and they usually work very well, but for some reason they failed in this case. So I'd like you to please consider to look at it, because I know the city really needs the low-income housing, and if this happened with me, it might happen with someone else in someone else's units. So just raise this question, and if you can, answer to me by phone or email. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, and I want to thank you for your comment. And as I said, we can't answer on the spot, but I would recommend that you continue to reach out to our rent stabilization department. It sounds like you have the email address and the phone number. As you stated, they are very good. So I know if you're persistent, you will get an answer to that question. And to our second speaker, are they in person or on Zoom?
They will not be speaking after all.
Okay, well, thank you. That concludes the public comments for this evening. Moving on to item number 7, the manager's report. We have our special guest returning, Rent Stabilization Supervisor Gloria Aviles. Please give your report.
Yeah, hi, good evening. Chair, Vice Chair, members of the Commission. Tonight's events, obviously tonight's appeals are 2, D4769 and D4772. For the look ahead, there will be, for our next meeting of December 14th, there will be 2 appeals heard, D4785 and D4794. That's my report for tonight.
Thank you. Are there any questions for, yep.
Thank you, Chair. The question is not regarding the report, but what we heard from the public member, if the staff could come back the next meeting with some information regarding what was said today in the public comments. So I'd just like to know what's the story there. If the tenant lost the inclusionary unit. Was the tenant offered a replacement affordable unit, or what's the story behind that? If staff could just brief us on at the next meeting.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
We'll have that for you.
I just wanted to follow up on that and see if staff had any recommendations. What I understood from public comment was that there is a suggestion that they're going to hear back from somebody else who they might be able to speak to who could answer their questions, or who they should follow up with after feeling like they didn't get an answer.
We currently have contract with House Keys, which is the organization that assists with leasing up units and getting tenants income qualified for these units. So we'll find out through our investigatory procedures exactly who they spoke to. Was it a representative from House Keys, or was it a representative from our division? And we'll provide a full report.
Thank you so much.
if I could, there's discussion about a study session maybe in the future. If we could maybe include a note about the issue that was spoken about, and specifically as it relates to the loss of a low-income unit for, there's an owner family landlord occupant exception that I know sometimes certain rental units can be taken off the market if they're occupied by the owner of the building or a very, very close family person. I think it'd be good maybe just to learn a little bit more about that area at our study session, and I suspect that might be something that's going on with the public comment speaker.
So I'll just say that the issue that's brought up by the public commenter is an inclusionary housing issue. It's not a rent stabilization issue. So for the training purposes, if it's helpful to have an understanding of the difference, but it's a unit that's governed by an affordable housing agreement. It's under a separate section of the municipal code. So that's not generally something that's within the commission's jurisdiction since it's not rent stabilization, but as part of the training, if it's helpful, we can give any differentiations between the two if that's helpful.
I appreciate that clarification. I'd still love to learn a little more about that area, and there might be a jurisdictional issue here about rent stabilization and inclusionary housing, but we'll figure that out. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Item number 8 on the agenda are tonight's appeals. As Ms. Avila said, we do have 2 appeals this evening. Do we have for the first appeal this evening for D4769, do we have the landlord and tenant present?
Yes, so the landlord is present via Zoom, and I'm just admitting them into the Zoom meeting now, and the tenants are present in person.
Okay, thank you. And so for the parties that will be presenting to the commission this evening, these rules will apply to both hearings, so listen up. We'll first hear a staff report from our legal counsel, then the appellant will speak first. In the first case, the appellant was the landlord, and so you'll have 5 minutes to give your oral argument. You can divide that time between presenting your case and a rebuttal, or you can take all the time. The tenant in the first case will be the second speaker. You will have 5 minutes, and you will have to take all of that at once. You can't save it or divide it. And as pointers for everyone that will be speaking, make sure you say your name, city of residence, speak directly into the microphone so we can hear you, and it's also picked up for those that are watching at home. Stay on topic, especially to the items that are on appeal this evening. Please don't get into sort of the outside issues or things like that, because we won't be able to opine on those, anyways. If you submitted new evidence, we'll have to decide if we are going to consider the new evidence. And so if you do want to speak about why we should consider the new evidence, why it wasn't presented previously, I would use your time, your 5 minutes to speak about that. Legal counsel, will you give your report, please?
Thank you, Chair, and good evening to Chair, Vice Chair, and Commissioners. My name is John Natalizio. I'm the legal counsel to the Rent Stabilization Commission for the City of West Hollywood. This appeal results from a hearing examiner's decision, which in relevant part determined the following: a $20 rent reduction due to popcorn ceiling falling into the unit, a $14 rent reduction due to a deterioration of the bathroom wall, no rent reduction for the bedroom wall as it was addressed in a prior decision, a $5 rent reduction for the deterioration of the bathroom hardware, a $10 rent reduction for improperly maintained vent hood piping, no rent reduction for the substandard door frame as it was addressed in a prior decision, no rent reduction for a loud noise from piping as it was addressed in a prior decision, an $8 rent reduction for the absence of appropriate floor insulation, and a $14 rent reduction for a loose access panel. Landlord submitted a timely appeal, which claims the decision is not reasonably supported by the findings made or evidence in the record, and that the hearing examiner's determination constitutes an abuse of discretion. Specifically, landlord argues the following in the appeal: that for the failing popcorn ceiling, deteriorated bathroom wall, condition of the bedroom wall, and deteriorated bathroom hardware, that the tenants were uncooperative in relocating and were agreeing to the scope of work and therefore intentionally interfered. 2, the improperly maintained vent hood piping is the tenant's responsibility for cleanliness. 3, that the substandard door frame was fixed as of June 2023. 4, that the landlord's representative has not identified the loud noises that were complained of. 5, that the absence of flooring insulation is not a change in services, and the tenants will not cooperate in relocating to install the new carpet. And 6, that the access panel does not allow access to the unit, and there's been no change to the tenant's housing services since the outset of the tenancy. Due to the number of issues in this appeal, staff will defer to the analysis in the staff report. However, in summary, staff finds that the hearing examiner's decision should be affirmed with respect to all issues appealed, except for the finding of a substantial rent reduction of a housing service for the lack of floor insulation and the corresponding $8 rent decrease, which staff believes should be reversed. Therefore, staff recommends adopting Resolution RSC 23-638. You, as the Commission, have the power to affirm, reverse, modify, or remand the appeal decision of the hearing examiner. The Commission reviews the hearing examiner's decision under the substantial evidence standard, which requires the Commission to make sure there is substantial evidence that reasonably supports the hearing examiner's decision is credible and of solid value. If that evidence is found, then the decision must be upheld, even if there's also evidence that could support a different outcome. The Commission does not substitute its judgment for that of the hearing examiner or reweigh the evidence. And as it relates to questions of law, the Commission applies an independent or de novo standard of review. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the commissioners to legal counsel?
I just have one. In regards to the flooring, if a tenant, it seems like, well, I'll ask the question. If a tenant moved into an apartment that, let's say the code did require some sort of floor insulation, and they moved into, signed a lease, and lived in a unit that failed in that area, is that the base, is that one of the, would the tenant be eligible for a decrease in services? Because it seems like that was not entirely, but part of the basis for your reasoning for why they wouldn't. It was not because it was not a code violation.
When you mean if the, sorry, and what do you mean by if the residents were, like, had the insulation?
If there was a unit that did not have floor insulation, and it was a code violation, but the tenant moved in, signed a lease, and nothing changed in terms of the services they received, and then they brought it to the hearing examiner's attention, would they be entitled to a rent decrease even if it were a code violation, simply on those?
Right, so you're saying if it wasn't a housing service, but for some reason having floor insulation, or sorry, having a lack of floor insulation was a code violation, then yes, it wouldn't matter that it wasn't, it didn't exist at the outset of the tenancy because it's a violation of the code, I guess, whatever code it would be, whether it's the municipal code or California Health and Safety Code or whatever it is. But in that hypothetical, yes, I don't want to answer, I guess, a hypothetical if it's eventually it's before us, but presumably in that situation, similar to what we've talked about here, if there is a code violation, it doesn't matter that there wasn't a housing service at the outset of the tenancy because it's a code violation, and under the RSO, violations of any health and safety laws is deemed a violation of the RSO.
And a reduction in services.
Correct.
Thank you.
Commissioner or Vice Chair Moore? Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Question, Mr. Natalizio, regarding the same flooring insulation, but from a different angle. The staff recommends to reverse this $8 rent reduction because there's no documentation to support there's no evidence to substantiate the findings of the examiner for the rent reduction. And when I'm reading finding of facts, section 21, item 21 on page 47 of our packet, it says that the respondent, which I assume that's the landlord, acknowledged the problem and indicated the issue would be repaired in the upcoming renovations of the unit. So if there was acknowledgement by the landlord that the problem exists, why do we need documentation to substantiate that the service was reduced? Just want to understand that.
Where are you looking in the decision?
It's a finding of facts.
At which number, sorry?
It's number 21, page 22nd of the finding of facts, which is page 47 of our packet. I want to know if I'm looking at the correct, if I understood correctly.
I think 21 is relating to
Installation of
the claim that the unit above them, it's too loud and there's no insulation between the unit. That's not relating to the flooring.
Not relating to the floor, okay. So
And that ceiling issue wasn't appealed.
I see. All right.
Item 28 addresses
Okay. Yeah, I got confused with that, so thank you for clarifying. Nothing further.
All right, thank you. So are there any public comments?
No public comments.
Very wonderful. So the first appeal, the landlord in 4769, please come to, actually they're on Zoom. And they've been admitted?
Yes.
Alrighty, can you hear me, Natalie?
Yes,
Right.
yes, I can.
All right, wonderful. So you'll have 5 minutes. Would you like to divide that time between presenting your case and a rebuttal, or would you like to take it all?
I guess rebuttal, if possible, I guess in sections.
Okay, and how do you want to divide it?
That's a great question. What are the options, I guess?
So you can do, 3 and 2, 2.5, 2.5, or because our secretary is amazing and she's going to be timing you, you can talk until you're content, and then she can tell you how much time you have left for your rebuttal.
I mean, I guess what I can go ahead and do is just take it all at once and just go from there.
Alrighty, just state your name, city of residence, and you can begin.
Sure, my name is Natalie Bastidas, and I live currently in Pasadena. While the landlord makes no attempts of denying the work that needed to be done, we are actually currently in the process of completing all of these items stated. The popcorn ceiling is falling, which is currently being remediated, if not already completed, by our current vendor, ensuring that the hazardous materials have been safely removed. For the bathroom wall is deteriorated. The remediation of the bedroom wall is currently underway while the vendor is completing the work. We are currently under a complete impasse, only due to the resident being present while the vendor is trying to complete this. So with the resident being there currently, we are not able to move forward at this moment in time with these items. As far as the bathroom hardware is another item. It should be known that after the acceptance of the unit upon move-in, resident did not like the spec of the hardware, so we're currently in the process of getting these items accommodated. As far as the vent hood piping not being properly maintained, we're not denying that that should be something that landlord is an acceptance of that, and we are currently underway of trying to address this potential issue with the vendor as well. With the vendor completing the work, with the tenant being present, so we're currently having an issue with the tenant, and I do apologize for that. The resident has thwarted the landlord efforts in every step of the way currently as we're trying to get all of this processed. Just so you are aware, Sarah's Asset Management, we just took over this property from Moss & Company as of September 15th. So I do understand while all of this has been ongoing for months, we are currently in the process of trying to get this remediated as soon as possible. With the tenant, we have faced a number of challenges where the tenants have interfered with our hired vendors. A vendor that is completing the work will not complete the work with the residents present, and the resident will not allow the work without being, the resident will not allow the work without them being present. While it makes this virtually impossible to complete the work and asking to reconsider the rent reduction concurrently, as you can see, we are not denying the work should be done, but we are trapped trying to make these repairs in good faith with the tenants. We're currently in the pause, as currently the tenants have refused landlord access until the tenant agrees to the scope and spec of the current demands. So again, we are trying to get all of this sorted out in good faith as well, and we're not denying that any of these should not be completed. I think that's all I have at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Stand by. We may have questions from the commission, and I do have a couple. Of the repairs, which ones, you know, are you or the landlord sort of saying can't be done with the tenants present?
So right now, what we are trying to complete, or what we are trying to complete at the moment in time, we're trying to remediate the bedroom wall. We already completed the bathroom walls. We also already completed the popcorn ceiling. The vent hood piping is also underway, and that's something that we removed. While we were removing those items, there were additional items that we need to be remediated at this time. However, with the hostile environment that we have encountered, unfortunately, we are unable to move forward with this process in time, as all work has been halted. As far as the access panel, that's something that we're also trying to get resolved during that time.
Okay, I didn't. Oh, go ahead. Well, I guess
No,
just
sorry, go ahead.
just to redirect. So, I still didn't hear which of the repairs you need the tenants out of the apartment for.
Sure.
Is it the
So-
flooring, the
So
loud
right now,
noise?
the flooring has been lifted. So there's currently no flooring in the moment in time. So that's something that we are trying to complete. We will be putting padding to the new carpet and also new flooring for the bathrooms and both kitchens. There's also cabinetry. I'm not sure if this is part of that same hearing or if that's a different hearing.
The cabinets aren't on appeal.
It's not on this appeal, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so that's a different hearing. So there's multiple, I believe there's 2 hearings. So we are trying to complete those items from both hearings.
So is it the bathroom? Is it the bathroom wall that you're saying to complete that you need the tenants out for?
Well, for the tenants are already out of their apartment. There's no personal items in that current apartment. However, they are stopping by every single day, and it's making it difficult for our current vendors to continue any work there, as it is a little hostile.
Okay, I understand. I think I saw another question from a commissioner. Yep.
Sure.
Commissioner Kirby's.
Yeah, I don't understand. And my question does kind of follow along the same lines. So I'll start with my question I was going to ask before hearing you speak right now, but my question was going to be, the hearing examiner determined that, ruled against you that, that the tenants were not, did not need to be moved out of the apartment to fix these repairs. And then the staff review of this item also agreed with the hearing examiner that there's no need for the tenants to be moved out to do these repairs. So my initial question was going to be, why do you still argue that the tenants need to be out to make these repairs?
Of course. Okay. So for that, by remaining in the unit, the residents would have been exposed to environmental hazards due to the presence of asbestos containing materials, which was because due to the age of this building, there is known asbestos in this unit and throughout the community. Asbestos, as you may know, is a hazardous material known to cause severe health problems. With the presence of asbestos in their living environment poses significant risk to their health and safety.
So is that the reason why you're not proceeding?
No, we already completed that portion. So that's already completed. So right now, the tenants are moved out of their current apartment. So that portion is completed.
Okay. So why aren't the repairs being done? You've mentioned the hostility.
Correct. So several days ago, we were in there completing another item from the other appeal from the written examiners. With that, the tenants are coming in on a daily basis, checking the progress of the items, and with that, the residents did not agree with the current scope that's currently in there, and with that, they did get into confrontational with the current vendor. So with that, the vendors and the tenants are not seeing eye to eye, and the work cannot be.
So what I heard you say earlier, and I think you just reconfirmed it, is your contractor that you've hired to do this work has decided that they will not do this work if the tenants are present.
That is correct.
It's not necessarily your decision, but that's your contractor's. So can you choose a different contractor?
The other contractor that was going to be completing this original scope, they're the ones that backed out. During this time, I was able to find a second contractor, which they agreed to start the work, in which they have. However, the work has halted because of this incident.
Thank you.
And Chair and Commission, I just want to remind you that while it may be potentially germane, these are all events that happened after both the hearing and the issuance of the decision. I believe that this property manager said they took over in September, which again is after the issuance of the decision, and the events they're talking about are recent. So to the extent that this is new evidence or new facts coming in, I just want to make sure, remind everybody that this is something to be wary of in your deliberations.
Commissioner Rory.
Just to clarify, that the tenant is being housed in another unit in the building. Is that my understanding correct there?
Sorry, is that a question for
me? Yeah, that's for the
Sorry, I do
landlord.
apologize. Yes, so right now, the tenants are actually housing on their own. We are providing them a daily credit at this time. Their personal items from apartment 101 are being stored in apartment 206 at this time.
And their items are being stored and they're being allowed to live in another apartment. Is that correct?
No, right now they are currently living outside of a community of their own choosing, where I'm not sure exactly where, as they did not disclose that. However, we are providing them with a daily credit onto their current apartment for them to be housed elsewhere.
Okay. And their property is being allowed to be used in another unit in the building?
Correct. It's currently in a vacant apartment in our community.
Okay. And then this is just more for the chair. In light of the staff attorney's comments, there was more detail to the landlord's comment to the committee that I would be interested
Commissioner Rory, please speak into your mic.
Oh, sorry. There was more detail to the landlord's comment that was submitted. I know it's all after, but I think it's kind of germane, and I'd be interested in asking a little bit more about that, but only if you're okay with getting into that. We asked at the last meeting about looking into the kind of landlord comment, and I said no, because I thought that was all stuff that could have been brought up before. This is all after stuff, but I don't know if we're going to get into that, but I do feel like that's kind of germane to what we're going to have to deliberate on.
Are you referring to additional documents that they submitted or what they've testified to tonight?
They've alluded to it in the testimony, but there was more detail in the email.
So it's the email that you want us to be able to
Well, I wanted to
introduce as
ask a
evidence?
little bit more about that because I understood there was a police involvement with one of the vendors. If that's correct, and the landlord can verify that, this wasn't just a confrontation with the vendor. The vendor actually filed a police report. If that's correct.
That is correct, yes.
So what's the relevance to the items that we're discussing tonight?
Because tenant interference, I think, is a grounds for not continuing the rent reduction. And some of the stuff that got introduced was pretty amazing from my point of view. So I wanted to deliberate about that and have that be discussed if that's possible.
Got it. Before I answer your question, let me ask a question, and I think it may sort of help us to decide. So in a situation where there's been sort of these actions that have happened after the decision, where there's sort of this claim of tenant interference, had that been sort of considered by the hearing officer, there was testimony, but had it sort of this extent been considered, the hearing officer could have considered whether the tenant interference was the reason why, the reduction shouldn't occur. But here, since it's happened after that decision, is there a process for the landlord that's sort of akin to or similar to, them stating that they're in compliance, stating that they tried to make the improvements, they weren't able to, and that sort of they're not complying, but they can't comply, and so that is sort of the end of it?
Yeah, and there's two things. So one, I'll answer your question directly. So yes, one option would be if the commission went forward with staff's recommendation tonight, the landlord could file a compliance determination, and same thing as with a rent decrease application. They can submit all of the evidence of them trying to make the repairs or make the restoration of the housing service, and making the argument that because there's been intentional interference by the tenants, that they've complied or should be excused from complying with the order. And that just goes through the traditional compliance determination route. So then the tenants would have an opportunity to object to that, and then ultimately there's a hearing that would be held, and the parties could then submit evidence on that compliance determination. Then a decision is then issued by the hearing examiner on that compliance determination, and then that can be appealed to the commission as well. So there is a route for landlord to take. That's the answer to your question. And then I did just want to broadly caution that this scenario is very different than perhaps the last meeting, where these are all facts that have happened way after the decision was issued, after the hearing. The concern is that, especially when you're getting into situations where evidence is being submitted and it's talking about police reports and it's going to be disputed by the tenants, it turns into a de novo hearing, which is not what this is. There is a process under the regulations for the commission to hold a de novo hearing. I would never advise that. I would say that to the extent the commission finds that this information's germane and necessary to resolve this, a remand would probably be more appropriate to let the hearing examiner sort this out rather than doing a de novo hearing, which requires a whole set of extra steps. But with what is being potentially talked about and introduced by both, the landlord and I would imagine rebuttal and tenants, you get into issues of whether or not is this essentially creating a new hearing that neither party has had an opportunity to be able to address and provide, their own evidence to support and rebut. And so I would say if the commission does want this to be considered, that probably a remand would be a better solution.
And so to address Commissioner Rory, I would say that any events that happened prior to the hearing officer's decision that weren't in evidence that the landlord may be asking us to consider, that would be for us to decide if we should consider it. But if it's new incidents and new sort of occurrences since that hearing, I would say it's probably either it going back to the hearing officer on remand, or the landlord can apply to the rent stabilization department for the substantial compliance, noting that there's been, the tenant interference. Does that make sense? Okay, perfect. And Vice Chair Moore?
I just wanted to clarify something that I think that you said in your earlier testimony. Did you say that you are currently replacing the flooring but not putting a pad down underneath the carpet?
No, so we are replacing the carpet. There will be padding underneath that carpet. I think that's pretty standard from today's items from what we do. That's just standard, just to put padding underneath the carpet.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any additional commissioner questions? All right, thank you, Natalie. How much time does she have left if she does want to do a rebuttal?
1 minute and 45 seconds.
All right, so you can, if you want to, after the tenants speak, use that minute and some change. Right now, I'll ask for the tenants to come to the podium. You'll have 5 minutes to divide amongst yourselves however you see fit, or one of you all can take it. Just please state your name, city of residence, and speak into the microphone so we can hear you.
Hi, my name is Yunus Putakmani. I live at 8300 DeLongpre Avenue, apartment 101, California. And I'll likely be reading my scattered thoughts, if that's okay. I have 5 minutes, is that correct?
Correct.
And it is recorded, and you guys will communicate about it after the hearing. So I might speak a little fast to get through it.
Okay, and we'll deliberate in the hearing, and we'll make a decision tonight. So so just stick around after the landlord speaks. We'll deliberate, and then we'll make a decision tonight.
You got it. All right. So since new ownership, the building has been severely neglected. This was 2.5 years ago, prior to Cirrus's taking over management on September 15th of this year. We had Moss, the company that filed this appeal. The landlord has been deliberately abusing us to force us to vacate our rent-controlled leases. They have been renovating the vacant units extensively while categorically neglecting ours. They have completely ignored our maintenance requests, including floods, plumbing requests, emergency requests, electrical issues, and standard wear and tear. Cirrus has only taken over 6 weeks ago and has profusely apologized about Moss's neglect and promised that things would actually improve, which unfortunately they have not. We lived without a resident manager for 1.5 years. Our maintenance requests, as I said, have been ignored. We suffered 9 floods and leaks in our apartment alone, intrusions from burst old rusted pipes, cracks in the exterior walls and flooring, not to mention the breach of the covenant of quiet enjoyment and currently the wrongful eviction. There was no unit available for us to move our belongings into, as landlords, as Natalie just verified, have always insisted that we vacate our units for them to do the work. Now a unit has become available because Moss's previous resident manager that had lived there has vacated when Moss left, mid-September, so our belongings were housed there in October. As soon as Cirrus was able to accommodate this remediation and renovation as ordered by the city examiner, we absolutely cooperated immediately. This is a month ago. The altercation in question happened on November 1st, only last week. They had already been working for 3 weeks, but the only thing they accomplished was to vandalize my unit, to vandalize my personal property, as I had spent $15,000 in 2018 to upgrade my unit as per the estopel that I provided to the management company during the escrow process of the sale of the building. I have personal property, personal belongings in that unit, including hardware, including light fixtures, including shower glass doors. I have provided the full list to both management companies. When we walked in to inspect, as we are entitled to, as we are still being charged rent, we have noticed that my chandelier was ripped from the ceiling, thrown to the ground, my glass shower and bathtub doors have been damaged. All of the hardware has been taken off and misplaced and or stolen. When the one single handyman that was there, there's no licensed contractor, there's no supervisor, was deliberately continuing his work even though we walked in politely, we knocked, we entered, we greeted him. He was instructed by Austin Monroe, Natalie's staff, not to speak to us, so he turned back around and continued to saw nails. One of the nails hit my arm. We asked him to stop. I had to unplug his saw because he would not stop. We asked him to leave. We immediately called Austin. We immediately called Natalie. Nobody responded. They have been ignoring our emails for the past week. They have not addressed this issue or any other issue. They have halted the work. We are following up with them daily for them to continue. We have also gone to the Sheriff's Department as well as the city and have been instructed to file a 30-day notice to perform to the landlord because it has been a year and a half since the initial hearing decision and has been several months since the second hearing decision. So we filed a 30-day notice which will actually expire at the end of this month. If the work has not been done, and if it hasn't been done up to standard and up to code, then we will have to hire outside crew to finish the work and then follow the West Hollywood city guidelines on that process. The common areas have not been completed. The apartment has only been demoed and vandalized. No work really has been completed whatsoever. And we have been forced to relocate a month ago and gaslit into oblivion. We have proven all of these issues during both city hearings, and investigators even were sent by the city to our unit to prove our case. The landlord's request was therefore denied, the appeal, and in addition to that, there were a no-show during the initial hearing to prove that the work that they claimed to have been done had actually been done, which it wasn't. We are not there, we're not present, we don't live in the building, it's been a month. We go during our lunch break from work and just check on the process and on the progress, and always have emailed them to ask them to please be careful about my personal belongings and for us to please collaborate and cooperate.
Thank you, that's time.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, come back. The commission may have questions for you.
Okay.
Commissioner Kirby's.
Yeah, thank you. So tonight, this evening, here in front of us, I didn't hear you talk a lot about the specifics of tonight's case. So I want to ask you, the landlord is appealing this case on the 9 grounds, basically all the rent decreases he received, is denying or is asking for us to deny all of those. Staff is recommending that we uphold all of them except for the number 8, which is the $8 absence of appropriate flooring installation. Do you want us to uphold the hearing examiner's decision and award you all of these rent decreases? Do you disagree or agree with staff on the $8 for the flooring? Could you, in maybe 2 sentences, tell me that?
I would like for you to uphold the rent decrease examiner's decision based on the fact that we have proven that nothing was done to the hearing examiner and the landlord was a no-show and failed to prove that anything was done. And to address the $8 recommendation by staff, I feel that that should also be upheld because we live on the ground floor. We're directly over concrete, and it is my understanding that code requires underlayment, and we do not have any underlayment or temperature padding. Therefore, the city hearing examiner required that to be done and gave the credits. And we hope that that will be done during their scope of work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yeah, you can take your seat now. We'll see if Natalie wants to finish her time, and then the commission will deliberate. Natalie, did you want to use your 1 minute and 43 seconds?
Yes. As far as, so in regards to the door frame, which was addressed in prior decision, that's something that what we are agreeing for the no reduction awarded at this time, correct?
Could you repeat that?
Sorry. So as far as the door frame that was addressed, is that something that's in part of this hearing that for the rent reduction?
The hearing officer and staff mentioned that the door frame was a part of the prior D4709, so no.
Okay, understood. But as far as everything that's currently undergoing, I mean, we would like for, currently in this time, we are working with the attorney in regards to this violation, but we're asking for the rent reduction to be reconsidered or to place on hold only because we are trying to get this resolved as soon as possible. Again, this is something the tenants, the tenants should not be entering this apartment while there's work being done, as there's no personal belongings in their unit, while all their personal belongings are currently in the apartment 206. So they have no reason to be entering into this apartment during this time and halting work.
Okay.
So again, we are asking just for the rent reduction to be reconsidered or placed on hold during this time while we are trying to complete these items.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the landlord from the commission? Okay, thank you. We'll place you back on mute, and the commission will deliberate and then make a decision and vote tonight. Commissioner, legal counsel?
Yeah, I had a question for the legal counsel. Thank you, Chair. Mr. Natalizio, I'm going to go back to my question I asked initially regarding the flooring insulation, and you kindly pointed out to the item number 28 of findings of facts, which contains the same language stating that respondent acknowledged the problem and indicated that issue would be repaired. So my comment or question is that if there is acknowledgement by the landlord that the problem exists, why we're denying or why we're reversing the decision on the rent reduction for $8 based on no documentation provided to substantiate the decision?
So the issue here with the flooring is landlord acknowledging that there isn't temperature insulation in the unit is different than saying it's either one, a housing service that was previously provided, or two, a code violation. So that there isn't temperature insulation on the floor is staff's position that it does not violate any sort of code, whether it's the municipal code or any health and safety code. And there wasn't evidence in the record demonstrating that there was previously temperature insulation in the flooring, which would then create the housing service. So it was staff's position that it doesn't meet the definition of a housing service and it's not a code violation. And so there isn't substantial evidence in the record to support that a rent decrease is warranted for a lack of having temperature insulation in the floor.
So the recommendation to reverse, basically to deny the $8 is not because of the absence of any documentation. It's just because staff believes it's not a service.
Well, not entirely. There's two positions. There's the hearing examiner doesn't identify that let's talk about housing service. So the hearing examiner hasn't identified that flooring insulation has existed in the unit prior to the initiation of the tenancy. So on that basis, it doesn't meet the definition of a housing service because this temperature insulation has never existed in the unit. That's the first part. So staff believes there isn't evidence in the record to support that decision. Second, staff hasn't found that the temperature insulation is a code violation for purposes of violating the RSO. So in that scenario, even if it wasn't a housing service, we also don't find that's a code violation. And so on those two bases, we believe that the hearing examiner erred and that there isn't substantial evidence in the record to support that determination.
Thank you.
Along the same lines, so going back to the installation, because that's the one that I'm struggling with the most as well. So the hearing examiner, as Commissioner Topchin pointed out, in 21, discusses the insulation between the tenants' apartment and their neighbors above them. Says that that's a housing service, for providing sound installation, and use a similar sort of analysis for the temperature regulation. And I know so that one is before us. So 21 is pretty much before us because it's addressing the popcorn ceilings. And so I guess why are those two items viewed differently if they're both, installation?
I believe for the popcorn ceiling, the hearing examiner found in the decision that the rent reduction was based upon the falling ceiling and not the insulation. So give me a second.
While our legal counsel's looking that up, I just want to disclose for the record, before we get into any deliberation, that one of the witnesses mentioned in the hearing examiner's decision, Mr. King, is a professional acquaintance of mine. We probably are connected on social media, but I don't think I've talked to him in a couple of years, so there is absolutely no bias on my part. I could make a fair decision on this, but I wanted to disclose that I do know Mr. King.
Sorry, Chair. So I'm looking at page 38 of the PDF, where it's talking about the actual analysis for the repair of the popcorn ceiling, and then in parentheses it says falling off health hazard, no sound insulation. And the analysis essentially is saying that the tenants did not successfully establish by preponderance of the evidence that the sound or noise from the upstairs unit is a result of the landlord's failure to perform minimum maintenance, or that housing service was discontinued or substantially eliminated. So that's referring to the claim of lack of insulation. But then the hearing examiner goes on to say, however, there was sufficient evidence to establish that a rent reduction in housing service with regards to the falling ceiling, and as a result, a $20 reduction is warranted. So I think the distinguishing thing here for the ceiling was that the ceiling was falling and not that there was a lack of insulation in the actual ceiling itself.
Okay, because in the findings of, in fact, item 21 that was pointed out, they talk about it as more of a sound insulation. And that was on page 47.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I think that it's either just a general statement or it's a inconsistency in the decision. But I think if you look at page 50, which is the actual order in which to restore the rent, so it says, in order to have the rent reduction restored to the pre-hearing levels, the landlord is required to do the following. And A is the landlord shall repair units popcorn ceiling such that material from the ceiling does not fall. So that doesn't say that they also have to install like insulation in the ceiling. So I think the focus, even though I do agree that 21 is different than the actual analysis, but looking at the decision, I think that the focus for the ceiling is based upon the ceiling falling into the unit and not a lack of insulation. If the commission disagrees, I mean, that's your prerogative, but that's my interpretation.
Chair, is there possibly a confusion of when they're referring to popcorn? Like sometimes I think of the popcorn as like insulation material, but I think in this case they're talking about the popcorn that's just like simply that speckled stuff on your ceiling that falls on occasion. So does that change your view?
Well, I think one of the uses for popcorn ceiling was sort of like an insulating
okay,
thing. So
yeah, it doesn't sound like there's any confusion then.
Yeah, correct. All righty. Do you want to kick off the deliberation? Oh, question, go for it.
Yeah, just to go back so that maybe we can separate this from our deliberation, or at least in our minds we can satisfy it in some way. You spoke earlier about when we were kind of going down the road of why they couldn't allow access and the police report and all that stuff, and you talked about de novo hearing. I'm not suggesting that, but that basically you gave two routes. One was currently today, the landlord could go file their compliance, I don't remember, like, determination, and explain why they're unable to comply with the order, and they would have a hearing and decide it that way. In that case, the hearing examiner has the authority to stop the rent decreases from the date of the filing of the determination or compliance determination, but only to that date. Is that correct?
You're asking when would be the effective date of the compliance determination if the landlord filed it?
Yes.
It wouldn't be the date that they applied for the compliance determination, because what ends up happening is the staff receives the compliance determination, and then we send out a notification to the tenants indicating to them, your landlord has given us documentation that they've substantially complied with this process, and this is the evidence that they provided. So in this case, they would say, tenant intervention, we haven't been able to do the work, and so it gives the tenants an opportunity to respond to the compliance determination, and then the hearing examiner or staff member could then make a determination of whether they will restore the rent or whether their deduction still lies. So it doesn't happen.
Yeah, my question basically is, so in that scenario, what is the best case scenario for the landlord under those circumstances in terms of the date that the rent would be restored?
So it really depends on when the application's submitted and how long it takes for the tenants to respond, because I think there's only a 10-day period between the time that they send back the tenants the documentation that the landlord submitted. So if they submit this in the beginning of the month, and by the middle of the month we get response from the tenants, if the rent is restored, it would be restored on the first of the next month.
But I'm talking about when it goes to a hearing examiner. So what the authority, the hearing examiner would examine all of that information and determine a date when the date would be restored. And I'm trying to figure out the best case scenario for the landlord in that scenario.
To submit their compliance determination at the beginning of the month, so that they sort of have a guarantee that by the beginning of next month, there's a full restoration of those items.
Okay. And then, so my second question to that is, so if the landlord, if we were to remand this back and say, hearing examiner, take into consideration all of this new information, what would be the best case scenario? That in that situation, it's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, the hearing examiner would then have the authority to review the entire case ahead in front of them. It would basically, if they chose to, basically void out any decision they've made so far, or change it, modify it, to where they could theoretically remove the rent reduction entirely from clear to the date that it's currently implemented. Is that right, Mr. Menazio?
Dr. Bashir, I was looking for the answer to the effective date of the compliance determination to get you the answer.
So in that scenario, we know that there will be a date. The first scenario, we know that there will be a date. The hearing examiner is not going to be able to go back to the beginning of this case. There's going to be a date from whether it's the compliance was filed, or whether it was the staff determination, or whether it was the 10 days after. There's a set date, and it's going to be within the next, within that 30, 45-day period. My question is, the alternative for the landlord, or if we were to have done, or we were to take the second route and option and remand the entire case and ask the hearing examiner to review all of this evidence that we're talking about and all of the arguments going back and forth between the landlord and the tenant, we're essentially not approving. The hearing examiner still has the authority to basically reach back into the decision they've already made and make any changes they want, and potentially, if they felt it was necessary, remove their decision completely of any rent decrease.
So
Clear
on a
action.
remand, the hearing examiner would be limited to the scope of remand ordered by the commission. So it would be based upon you being the commission, your specific orders to the hearing examiner.
But if we were returning it to the hearing examiner for those purposes of whether there was resistance from the tenants to allow the landlord to do the work, which is probably the only reason I think that we would return it at this point, that would apply, or the hearing examiner could, under those terms, go back as far as they.
Right. I think practically, if the remand order was to consider whether tenants have intentionally interfered with the landlord's actions in a manner that violates the RSO and therefore would absolve the landlord from complying with their duties under the RSO, I think practically, as the commission, you would have to allow the hearing examiner to look at everything, and it would, at least for the specific issues that are being addressed by landlord for the specific issues that they're saying the tenants are interfering with. But yeah, I think practically it would open everything back up that is being remanded.
Okay. I'm not advocating that. I'm just asking the questions for clarification.
And would you like to kick us off for deliberations?
Sure. I actually, I'm disturbed by what we've heard about the conflicts between the landlord, mainly sounds like primarily the previous landlord and the contractors and the tenants, not so much Ms. Bastidas and the current management company. But regardless, that's not really in front of us this evening. I actually agree with staff's decision, staff's recommendation. I think that the hearing examiner was correct on all issues except for the flooring. As the evidence shows that there was no padding underneath or no insulation underneath the carpet prior to, it's not a violation of the code, so there should be no rent decrease because it's not a decrease in services. So I would actually be interested to hear what everyone else has to say, but I'm inclined to support staff's recommendation to affirm and whatever the word is where we disagree with the reverse. Thank you, and reverse on the flooring.
Are any volunteers?
Thank you, Chair. Well, after tonight's discussion and hearing the testimonies from both parties and the clarification from the legal counsel, which helped me a lot because I was a little bit troubling with the flooring insulation item. But it's clear to me, since this isn't a code violation, it was the insulation was not there. At the time, the tenants rented the unit, I believe, in August of 2008. So this cannot be considered a housing service under the provisions of the Rent Stabilization Ordinance. So therefore, I'm fine with that part being reversed. So I will support the staff's recommendation to affirm in part and reverse in part the findings of the examiner. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Yes, I am going to agree with my fellow commissioners that have spoken so far. I am very disturbed by what I've heard, and I'm going to say this professionally and as nicely as possible to the tenants that are here tonight, but what you have described is not acceptable if I was the attorney for your landlord. I've been an attorney for 10 years now. It's probably one of the most inappropriate things I've heard, to go pull someone's equipment out of the wall and those type of things. I know it's very difficult to have this work done. I'm a tenant myself. I've gone through this process, but at a certain point, you have to let the work get done and then resolve it. You've asked them to do it. They have to get it done. If they've broken things, that can be resolved. I understand it's very stressful. It's your home, but this is probably one of the worst things I've heard in the 5 years I've been here. So I'm going to affirm the hearing examiner's decision.
try to keep it brief because I don't have much to add. I'm in agreement. The events that have happened since the hearing examiner's decision, so I don't think that they're appropriate here, and they can be easily adjudicated through a process that already exists through a compliance determination hearing, and I think that's the appropriate avenue to take these issues. I'm troubled that it's taking 3 or 4 weeks, a month, to make these sorts of repairs, and I would be very frustrated with that. So I would be interested in, if this ever comes before us, seeing why that's the case. But as far as the flooring, because of the age of the building, if it was a code violation now, it might not have been a code violation when it was built, which meant it was grandfathered, and that would be an issue that we couldn't decide here. None of us are experts in that regard. So I would suggest that that if the tenants do feel that that's a code violation not to have the insulation there, that the code enforcement team at the city is very good, and that they could help adjudicate whether that was the case or not, and then you can determine how to move forward with that. But with that said, I support staff's recommendation in full.
Thank you. Vice Chair Moore?
I agree with my colleagues, and I'll go with staff's recommendation as well.
And Commissioner Rory?
I would have voted to affirm on all the substantive issues. I agree that the flooring is not a loss of a previously provided service, and all the individual items I'm comfortable with affirming. I think for me, when I was reading the appeal, the first time I was tipped off of the interference issue, at least prior to the hearing examiner. I think there was evidence in the record about potential interference, and I looked at that and I was like, probably not enough to really find interference. And then the more recent testimony tonight was a lot more troubling. And so I guess I'd be fine with affirming, but I hope that the landlord looks into whatever remedies they might have on the compliance determination, if there's an avenue there. And for the tenants, I would just say, you know, I immediately was sympathetic to the frustration you felt, because this has been years of building for you guys, and then now hearing tonight you personally invested your time and money into the unit, and now it made a lot more sense why you'd want to go in there and see what's going on. But I think that you have to be really careful about that, and I was really sensitive tonight about the landlord's issues about that. So I'm fine with affirming, but you know, the landlord's going to have their compliance determination rights if they want to. So please be careful going forward and let this work complete itself as best you can, and hopefully you get back in there and, you know, each side can kind of take a little pause here and let the new management have an opportunity to, you know, show what they can do. And I know you guys are still going to be in the unit, and hopefully for a long time to come. So thank you.
Thank you. So for all of the issues outside of the installation, I agree with staff's decision. You know, there's certainly some testimony regarding repairs that have already been done, and so as my colleagues have stated, I think, you know, it would be in the landlord's probably best interest to apply for the compliance determination as soon as possible on the work that's already been completed. So that way the potentially the reduction is removed, and you're able to, you know, have more money to go towards the repairs. In reading the hearing officer's determination, you know, as they discuss the popcorn ceiling, and there's, you know, discussion about it being potentially asbestos, there's discussion about it being also for insulation. And so for me, you know, when I see that there is no flooring insulation, I certainly, you know, can relate, you know, to why that would make the temperature in the apartment colder, et cetera. And so on that, you know, I see why the tenants would want that to be done. However, I do see I guess sort of the distinction between the popcorn ceiling, whether it's for the asbestos or for the installation, is that it already existed and it's deteriorating, and that's, you know, causing there to be no insulation for sound. And also it's kind of gross. So I see that, you know, why the popcorn is sort of different than the flooring, because the flooring insulation didn't previously exist. And so, you know, on that point, I do agree with staff regarding that reduction. And also, it sounds like with the new flooring that the landlord's putting in, it will have a pad and it will have that insulation. And so that sort of does away with that. I think sort of regarding that not being some sort of code violation, not germane to this point, but I think that you know, feels kind of rough. For the 2 months of summer or winter that we do have, it does seem like you would want insulation for flooring, et cetera. But with that said, I am in agreement with the staff's recommendation sort of based on that. And so I would entertain a motion if there is regarding resolution 23638 from commission.
Yes, I will make a motion to adopt resolution RSC number 23-638, which is a resolution of the Rent Stabilization Commission of the City of West Hollywood, affirming in part and reversing in part the hearing examiner's decision as to application number D-4769.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Madam Secretary, roll call, please.
Commissioner Bass?
Aye.
Commissioner Kerpes?
Aye.
Commissioner Martz?
Aye.
Commissioner Rory?
Aye.
Commissioner Topshin?
Aye.
Vice Chair Moore?
Aye.
Chair Wright?
Aye. Motion passes. If the parties have any further questions, you can reach out to the Rent Stabilization Division at 323-848-6450 or via email, or go online and schedule an appointment. And so with that, before we hear tonight's second appeal, parties, please stand by. We will take a brief 7-minute break. Thank you. Alrighty, we are back in session. The next appeal this evening is D4772. The landlord appealed. Are the parties this evening present?
Yes, both parties are present in chambers.
Right, wonderful. If you will recall the rules that we gave at the beginning, please stay on point to the issues that are being appealed. The landlord will have 5 minutes. When you come up to speak, just let us know how you want to divide that time, if at all. The tenant will have 5 minutes. That, there's no division for that one. So if the landlord will please come to the podium, state your name, city of residence, and your preferred pronouns or how you want us to address you, you can begin.
Chair, can we vote?
Thank you so much for the reminder. And to the landlord, I do apologize. If you'll take your seat for one moment, the legal counsel still needs to give the report. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Chair, and good evening again, Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioners. My name is John Natalizio. I'm the legal counsel to the Rent Stabilization Commission for the City of West Hollywood. So this appeal hearing results from a hearing examiner's decision, which in relevant part determined the maximum allowable rent and overcharges. And the hearing examiner determined the following: that the base rent for the unit is $1,512.50, that the current MAR for the unit, or at least at the time of the application and the hearing, was $1,557.88, and that landlord has retained excess rent in the amount of $3,580.90. Landlord submitted the appeal, and the appeal claims that the decision is clearly in error. And specifically, landlord is arguing that tenant failed to pay all scheduled rent on time, which violated the lease agreement and terminated the move-in special or rent concession. Thus, the actual rent demanded during the first year was actually $1,650. As it relates to the MAR, staff finds that the hearing examiner correctly determined that the base rent and the initial MAR for the unit was $1,512.50. Staff finds that the hearing examiner correctly calculated the current MAR by applying the permissible annual general adjustment of 3% to that base rent, and finding that the MAR is currently $1,557.88. And as it relates to the calculation of overpayments, staff finds that the hearing examiner correctly took the calculated MARs and applied it against the amounts charged and paid by tenant. And staff finds that the overpayment calculated in the amount of $3,580.90 is accurate. Therefore, staff recommends adopting Resolution RSC 23-637. You, as the Commission, have the power to affirm, reverse, modify, or remand the appeal decision of the hearing examiner. The Commission reviews the hearing examiner's decision under the substantial evidence standard, which requires the Commission to make sure that there's substantial evidence that reasonably supports the hearing examiner's decision is credible and of solid value. If that evidence is found, then the decision must also be upheld, even if there's also evidence that could support a different outcome. The Commission does not substitute its judgment for that of the hearing examiner or reweigh the evidence. And as it relates to questions of law, the Commission applies an independent or de novo standard of review. Thank you.
All righty, are there any questions for, Commissioner Topchin?
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me. Ms. Natalizio, so I know we had this similar cases in the past when we had to determine the MAR, the maximum allowable rent, based on the actual proof of payment that received or collected by the landlord. But for this case, and I'm reading the actual language, which I believe it's the actual language of the ordinance in your analysis on page 4, which reads that in order to determine the monthly rental rate actually demanded, received, or collected when recording the initial rental rate, the RSO shall consider any discounts or moving concessions by calculating the total amount actually intended to be collected, etc. So my my confusion with actually, the word actually intended to be collected. So I remember in the past, in the cases we had, we ruled based on the actual payment when we didn't, I believe, have any other documentation that would show the intent, the landlord's intent to collect a different rate. So, but for this particular case, and maybe I'm not clear on this or I missed something, we're not understanding anything, a specific point, maybe you can clarify that. Here we have sufficient documents that would show the rent was actually intended to be collected in the sum of $1,650, which is evidenced by the residential lease agreement and the proof of payments and statements, and I'm not sure what was reported by the owner in the re-registration form. I don't believe we have it in the packet, but if the re-registration form also included $1,650, wouldn't that be the owner's intent to collect $1,650, but he gave the concession to collect a lesser amount? So if you could just, help me to understand. Thank you.
Yes, staff's position at least is that in reading that section, and particularly if you look at the evidence in the record, the amount charged to tenant was the $1,515 that they have on the ledger, the $1,650. I mean, that's consistent with what the lease says, but I think when you're looking at the intent to be collected, the intent to be collected was the $1,515, or I guess the $1,512.50, because that's what was actually supposed to be paid to the tenant, and that was confirmed by the landlord. And so the fact that there's this rent concession, the purpose is to prevent a balloon payment after the fact, and that's exactly what this is. And so I think couching the $1,650 as the intent to be accepted is inaccurate. Obviously, the commission can disagree with that, as this is a legal question, but my interpretation of this is that when you look at the intent is, well, what did the tenant actually pay, and what did the landlord accept? And if the $1,512.50 wasn't what the landlord intended to collect, they would have said, hey, you're deficient by $137 or whatever it is. So I think when you're looking at intent, you have to look at what was accepted by landlord, and the ledger is clear that they accepted that amount.
Okay. So the actual demand or request to pay lesser rent, that would be the intent to collect a lesser amount, especially if there was no further action by the owner saying that you underpaid in rent.
Right.
So that the intent is to pay, to collect the lesser amount.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Kirpies?
I have questions along the same lines. And I'm not sure, I don't understand it well enough to know whether I agree or disagree or even understand the exchange that just happened. So what I'm reading here on page 4, or page 220 of our packet, but page 4 of your staff report, in the description of, in order to determine the monthly rental rate actually demanded, and then it talks about calculated the total amount actually intended to be collected during the initial term of the, something about divided over 12 months. Dividing that number, the total number of the months in the initial term. So I believe in this case, didn't they, in addition to offering didn't they also offer a 1-month free rent in this case? Or am I, yeah, okay. So I think that that refers to, in cases where there's a 1-month free rent, that's deducted and divided over the 12 months, and that's how we come up with the monthly MAR in that case, if it were just a clean case where there was no change in rent. Is that correct, Mr. Natalizio? if we were to look at this case without considering what's going on in the next year.
Right, correct. That's right.
Okay.
Yes, sorry, yes.
Okay, so that's how we determine the MAR. The reason we're not identifying or recognizing the 1650 is because that alone is an illegal rental increase, right? Because it's circumventing our rent stabilization rules.
Right, correct.
Okay, thank you. Now I think I understand it better in my head.
So would this kind of special be a really bad idea for rent stabilized units in the city of West Hollywood to have this kind of a deal?
So that's a business decision for the landlords to decide. You know, this regulation is attempting to, I think, address rent concessions, and I think that this regulation is trying to find a medium between the RSO and also understanding that there is a business incentive to provide these rent concessions, and especially getting tenants in and filling them, but that can't come at the cost of essentially creating a situation where rent can be $15.12 and then the next year it's $16.50.
Got it.
I mean, that's functionally renders the RSO moot.
Yeah.
So this is attempting to provide that happy medium.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, so that concludes any public comments on this?
No public comments.
Okay, wonderful. Alrighty, so to the landlord, now's your time to shine. You'll have 5 minutes. Just let us know how you want to divide it, and then you can state your name, city of residence, and begin.
Thank you very much. My name is Gideon Rossman.
Please speak into the microphone.
Thank you very much. My name is Gideon Rossman. I live in Beverly Hills. When the tenant moves in, we offer him a second month free rent. Our intention was to collect 11 times $16.50, and we gave the tenant an option. If he wants not to pay the second month, pay zero, or break the second month into 12 months. And I guess he chose to break it. It was better for his budget. The conditional 3 months was, and I'm quoting right now, is valid only if tenant pay all scheduled rent per lease agreement during the first year on the due date. Otherwise, lease will have to pay back the 3 month and other special credit. The tenant failed to pay rent on time in July, I believe. He bounced a check in October, so we canceled the 3 month. We enter an invoice in our system. In February, we enter credit for 3 months. In October, we enter an invoice to collect, and we intended to collect it. It was during COVID time, so we couldn't really serve a 3-day notice. We had also to be very careful not to try to collect it too much, but we definitely entered into our system, and our intention was to collect it. Tenant failed to pay twice more the rent, so total, I believe, was 4 times he missed payment, so he definitely violated the conditional for the 3 months, so the 3 months was voided. We intended to collect it. That's our intention to collect it. And that's why we think the rent should be $16.50, because that was the lease agreement. That's what we register with the city. We register it under $16.50. We wanted to collect $16.50, and that's our intention. Now, as a side note, if you go with the city examiner, you approve the $15.12, I calculate the refund that the tenant needs to get. If you go with the city, and I believe he made a mistake on his calculation based on the rent $15.12 per month charge, and based on what the tenant pay, the credit that the tenant needs to receive, and I have the exact number. It should be $22.99.70 instead of $35.80.9. But that's only if you go with the hearing examiner.
Can you
I'm
walk
done.
us through your math on that number, the 2299.17?
I provided to the city an Excel spreadsheet, which I have it here. I enter every month 1512. I enter all the payment of the tenant. He bounced twice check, so I had to recharge him for the bounced check. So it's a credit and charge. And I went all the way to October, actually, including October. I believe the examiner calculation was up to August. I went all the way to October. And it's simple math on Excel. Plus, minus, plus, minus, plus, minus, and we overcharge. If you go with the examiner, the overcharge will be $22.90. And I will be happy to provide the Excel spreadsheet.
Did you provide that to the examiner? The spreadsheet that you're
Yes.
referring to, you did? Do you recall what exhibit number it is?
Exhibit A.
Exhibit A.
Evidence number 3, Exhibit A, 1 of 2, 2 pages.
There's an agenda packet on, there's an agenda packet, and you can point to the page number. It might be easier for the commission to find it.
Well, I have only the first few pages of this. Oh, it's going to be there.
It'll be easier because you're going.
Oh, okay, let me see.
I don't think that Excel spreadsheet could have been provided because the hearing was on July 18th. So
I
anything
provided it for the appeal, not for the
so
hearing.
It's not in the.
It's not, okay.
Yeah.
Sir, could you turn to page 229 of that packet? Is that what you're referring to? 229.
No.
Okay.
Okay, are there any additional questions for the landlord? Yep, Commissioner Kirby.
I was just going to suggest that while the tenant is speaking, maybe on page 236, if you look at page 236, that's where the hearing examiner in their decision put rent paid, the MAR, the rent excess. Maybe if you could look at that chart and when you come back to the podium, tell us maybe where in that chart that there's a mistake, and that will help us identify it better.
I don't think I ever saw it, but...
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
On 236?
First time I see it, but it's okay.
You never got the hearing examiner's decision?
I got, but this page, I didn't see it.
Okay.
But,
I have another question for you, and I just lost it, so I'll have to do it on rebuttal. I'm sorry.
And then how much does he have? Oh, Commissioner Agassi?
Sir, very quickly, you mentioned that the tenant's check bounced. I just want to know, I just want to understand, is there any delinquent rent as of now, as of we speak? Is there, all the rent's been paid, late, but all the rent's been paid?
Please speak into the microphone.
all the rent was paid except the canceled 3 month. That was never paid.
Okay.
I remembered my question. You mentioned that you calculated the additional month was due in October. Did you ever notice the tenant at that time, or when did you give them notice that they owed that back month?
I personally did not give. My staff might have done it, but we enter an invoice in our system to be collected because at that time we could not really give 3-day notice. That's usually the way we notify tenant when they owe money, give them 3-day notice. But during COVID, that process was, we could not take this avenue, this route. So maybe it was fall between the chairs, but I'm sure somebody from my office called the tenant and mentioned to him that he bounced a check, and right now the 3 month is canceled. But he should have known because that was part of the lease. So we don't really need to tell him because that's part of the lease.
And the tenant didn't have access to your internal system? Like there's not a
No, they
public
don't have
interface
access.
with?
No.
Okay, thank you.
And sir, can you repeat again, what was the month that the rent was not collected or waived or credited? I just want to make
It
sure
was,
that that was not included in the
on
calculations.
On July 13, 2021, tenant bounce payment number 243091292. On July 14, we issued that invoice demanding the 1650. Rent due on September 1st was paid on October 2nd, so that was his second delay 1 month. And rent for October 1st paid on October 22nd, so that was his third.
So which one was not ever collected? You said there was 1 month that you never collected.
I mean, we collected all of those, the bounce check and the late rent, we collected it, but
So he
late.
paid everything, he
Late.
doesn't owe you any money.
He owed me only 1 month.
So
the
what
free
was
month.
that month?
The
The free
first
month,
month. Was,
which is the second month
yeah, the
of the
second
tenancy?
month.
So I just want you to state that month and the year.
Yeah, it was month number March, I believe, or April. When did this lease started? It was April. April was the second month for this lease.
Okay, the April's
April
2021.
2021.
All right, okay, so that's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Thank you. How much time does he have for his rebuttal?
2 minutes and 14 seconds.
Okay, thank you. After the tenant speaks, you'll have 2 minutes and some change. The tenant, you can start making your way to the podium. You will have 5 minutes to present your case. Just please state your name, city of residence, and how you want to be addressed.
Hello, my name is Patrick Ridgen. I live in West Hollywood, California. This is something very new to me, so also apologize for my less than professional work attire. I guess to address, as he did say, I did pay those late payments as I was notified with something on my door with the total of those, 2 bounced and 1 late that he had mentioned. Number one, I was never, to this day, I've never been notified that I did owe that $16.50. I actually just learned that right now. Because if I did, I would have paid it by now. And when I did receive the 1 notice for the things that I did owe, I paid it back right away. But I received 1 notice about that from something stuck to my door. They had an online portal, a very poor online portal with many, many issues. Even when I was late for my rent, there's no notifications. And every time I did pay my rent, I got a thank you for your payment email. So, and I actually, like I said, this is so new to me and it's a little overwhelming to do, but the 2 bounced checks, I do wish that I would have gotten a notification about those through their portal or what have you, because I would have taken care of that right away rather than having to pay 3 different things at once. And the main reason I did this to begin with the initial hearing was I had just spoken with a friend who was an attorney and just discussing things about RPM management in general, and he pointed me to the direction of, it was Eugene Maskey, I think his name is, for the Coalition for, it's rent or something, I can't remember at this very moment, very nice guy. But we went through all this, I spoke with their, I did their Zoom meeting where you can do the free attorney thing, talk like 10-minute chat with them on an online portal, and I had mentioned about the moratorium that was in effect at the time, and then the 151250, I believe, was the amount for the rent special that was advertised. They had brought it up, and they were like, this could be something that you should look into, which this was not even the original reason I was talking to the coalition. That's a totally different thing I'm in the process of trying to address. So that leads me here. Like I said, I did not know until 5 minutes ago that I owed $1,650. I don't want to be behind on payments to someone. You know, I would like a place to live, but I don't want to just ramble on. I'm not sure what else to say at this point. I'm sorry.
No, thank you. You're doing fine. So the commission now will have an opportunity to ask you any questions we may have. Are there any questions? So I have one question. So when you entered the lease, you know, were you aware that it was a, you know, quote unquote, a rent special, and that your rent would increase to the $1,650 after that first year?
Well, if I'm remembering correctly, it was, I can't remember what app, whether it was Craigslist or Zillow that it was advertised on, but when I did arrive to tour the place, the term rent special was said probably 30 times, which really hooked me. So, I mean, that's what I based it on when I had said yes to the place. If that answers the question.
It does, thank you.
Okay.
Commissioner Rory?
Do you recall reviewing the rent agreement and signing it?
2 years feels like a lifetime to me right now, so at this very moment, no.
Okay. But you don't deny that it was yours, you signed it and whatever was in the record was the actual rent agreement?
Repeat that, I'm sorry.
We have a rental agreement with your signature at the bottom. Right. That was your signature, you signed that agreement?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
All right, thank you. You can take a seat. The landlord will come back up and we'll deliberate. You can begin when you're ready.
Okay, just to answer, I checked the calculation and I believe he failed to acknowledge that the tenant bounced a check on October 17. Rent check bounced in the amount of $1,500. So I believe that's the difference between my calculation and the city examiner calculation.
That was 2022?
Is that this year or last year?
No, it's 2021. The bounce check is it's running 10/17/2021. So that's probably, I'm not sure exactly what he did here, but and again, I want to stress the fact that when we signed the agreement, it was 100% clear that it is $1,650 rent, and he's getting 1 month free rent promotion, and he needs to pay all rent on time, and he failed to do it. And it's very clear according to the agreement that if he failed to pay rent on time, the free month is void now. And that's why he owed it, and the only reason he didn't pay it is because of COVID restrictions.
Okay, are there any questions? Okay. All right, thank you.
I do have one, I'm sorry. You did mention earlier that he had a choice between taking the month free or
he had choice.
Having it basically prorated over the whole year.
Yeah, I'm giving the month free on the second month, and I'm ready to get 0 rent on the second month.
Okay, so my question for you is, on page 250 of that packet there, is the it's part of the residential lease agreement. There's already language written in there. This is boilerplate language that you use for all of these rent specials, isn't it?
Not really. Each
Okay.
one is different.
So you created this specifically for this?
Probably I didn't prepare it, but what I tell my guys always to make sure they can give the rent the 1 month free. I give the 1 month free on the second month. I have no problem for the tenant to prorate it because sometimes it's easier for them. And if
What I'm getting to is it doesn't offer the options there, so I'm trying to decide, is there another form here? Right in the middle of the bold underline, it says that it will be prorated over the 12 months, and I'm just trying to see where the other option is on this.
the other option is in my system that I enter the 1 month free on the second month, and I enter invoices in my system 1650.
Okay.
And as long as the tenant has a credit, because he has a credit, 1650, the credit is running in the system. So every month the credit is going down.
I understand. Thank you.
Okay, any additional questions from the commission? Okay, thank you. You can take your seat. All right, are there any volunteers from the commission to kick off deliberations on this?
For me, this is very easy. We have dealt with this before on the commission. We actually had city council pass updates to this, so we hopefully would clarify this issue. I would uphold the hearing examiner's decision, and I would not edit the amount owed back to the tenant. I don't think simple testimony that a check was bounced is sufficient for us to take into consideration. This is a legal question, so we look at this anew. And when this was brought before City Council, the staff report to City Council on this update to the RSO has a full explanation. And this is, you know, when you are looking at how a law is created and you can't figure out ambiguity, sometimes you go to the legislative history and look for the comments about what the legislators, or in this case, the City Council, was thinking when they passed a law or a change. And what Mr. Natalizio, our legal counsel, explained, the reasoning behind this law or this regulation change is accurate to what the City Council ultimately passed. And the staff report, which I think the City Council agreed with, is this approach is intended to discourage rent concessions. A landlord is offering a concession because it is what the market will bear, and the base rent is intended to reflect a figure consistent with market conditions when the unit is rented, in addition to being the amount actually demanded, received, or collected, allowing for an automatic increase outside of the annual general adjustment, whether in the initial lease term or a subsequent term, undermines the system of controls established by the RSO. I think that's very consistent with what the staff report tonight says. To me, this is pretty straightforward. And to answer the vice chair's question earlier, if I was a lawyer for a business person, I would be very, very cautious about these type of things. There may be ways to craft them separately. It would take me a long time to do that. It was not done here. And what my fellow commissioner brought up, I think on page 250, hammers the point home that this was spread out over 12 months. The rent was $15,250. It wasn't, I don't see a bonus month or anything like that. Even if it was a free month, I still would think it would be in violation of our regulations. But it's even more clear in this case, based on the agreement in 250, that the rent was at $15,12.50 for the first month, and the law doesn't allow the rent to bump up to $16.50, in my opinion.
Thank you, very thorough. Commissioner?
I agree with everything that's been said except for my colleague's objection to the 10/17/21 bounce check. But after looking at the 10, because I think that is relevant if it were the case, and if it were relevant in you know, pointing out that the hearing examiner made an error. But as I look at page 236 in the hearing examiner's decision, I don't find that the hearing examiner claimed that the tenant paid any money for 10/17/21. For the months of 5/4/21 through 8/2/22, the hearing examiner listed that the tenant paid a total of $15.15, and then what the excess MAR was. So there's no claim in the final, the excess rent, that was never involved in the calculation of a payment on 10/17/2021. And other than that, I agree with my fellow commissioners' analysis that these unfortunately, unfortunate for landlords, specials are a way to circumvent, and then to try to increase the rent later is a way to circumvent our rent control policies. And exactly as he read about the market, these specials exist because the market is the market. Otherwise, they wouldn't be necessary. Thank you.
Commissioner Bass?
Yeah, I thank you both for what you've had to say. It is more eloquent than what I will say, but I will point out that the lease does say 1650, and even though that's what it says, all leases for rent stabilized units have to follow our code. And whether it says something different or not, if it's in violation of the code, it would stand to reason that the code would rule in this case. Things in this lease, that stand out to me is it says that the stove is and the refrigerator are included, and the person renting is responsible for replacing it. Our code says if you provide a stove or refrigerator, it's up to the landlord to keep it in the same working order. It also says on page 251 that the tenant is required to pay a $3.61 payment each month to the City of Los Angeles for systematic code enforcement. We're not in the City of Los Angeles. And actually, the City of West Hollywood allows you to pass through a $6 fee, not a $3.61 fee. So neither one of those things, even though they're in the lease, would bind the tenant because they don't abide by the code. So even though it says 1650 here, as Commissioner Martz pointed out, our City Council made it abundantly clear that the way this would be calculated is exactly the way the hearing examiner did it. And so for those reasons, I would support staff's recommendation in full.
Thank you. Commissioner Rory?
Well, thank you both for coming tonight. And you did great, even if you were both informal. I'm really glad to have the benefit of you guys explaining a little bit about the history behind that, because I missed that entirely in the staff workup, and I apologize if I skipped that part. It was towards the end of the PDF. Because when I went through this, I was originally like, this is just a legal question about what does the total amount actually intended to be collected mean. And for me, I was sympathetic to the landlord because when I read the lease, the top line says $16.50 is the rent. There's clear language at the signature block. It's going to be, contingent on paying timely, and after, the first year, it's going to go to $16.50. So on that, I was like, wow, well, that seems like pretty good evidence of intent. But if this is an issue that's already been looked at by the council, I'm going to defer to my fellow commissioners on that. And the only thing I would add is I do think it's worse than unfortunate for the landlord to offer a rent concession like this and then put in all this language in the lease, and then that's not how the MAR is actually collected. So I almost feel like the city should tell landlords, don't offer or explain to landlords in their literature and advising, because it's, the RSO is for the tenants, it's also for the landlords, but I think the landlords have to understand that these type of rent concessions are going to impact their MAR, because that is basically what we're enforcing. And it does seem, as a layperson looking at this for the first time, like a more than unfortunate circumstance for the landlord. But I'll follow my commissioners on this, and hopefully the landlord understands going forward these rent concessions you should have your attorney look at them because they're going to impact your MAR.
Commissioner Marks? Herpes?
Yes.
Vice Chair Moore? I almost said Bass. Who are you people?
Like Commissioner Rory, I did learn a lot tonight. I was confused by the lease because the lease says one thing, but the amount that the tenant was paying for the year was a different thing. So that is where the decision really lies for me. So it's pretty clear that, I will obviously agree with staff's recommendation and the hearing examiner. So thank you.
So I, sort of a similar vein as Vice Chair Moore and Commissioner Rory, and when I read the language of Regulation 41001C that's cited throughout, the actually intended to be collected during the initial term language really sort of tripped me up because my interpretation would have been in line with what the landlord actually did here. However, Commissioner March, citing to the legislative history, which is my love language, so thank you, really clarified it because this language, somewhat ambiguous. I believe probably a couple of us probably thought it meant something different. With that legislative history, it really does give insight as to what the commission intended. And because what the commission intended was to avoid situations that we're in, I am also inclined to go to vote along with the hearing officer's decision and staff's recommendation. I believe everyone from the Commissioner Topchin is going to close us out.
Yeah, just very quickly, Chair. As I mentioned at the beginning, so we had this type of cases when we had to determine the MAR based on the actual proof of payment. And, my question was about the actual verbing, the intent, what the intended amount would be, what was reported in the agreement and the rent registry form, or what was collected actually and received. And thank you, legal counsel clarified that question for me. So this, other than that, there is no confusion, and there is no, to me, there is no any space or area to disagree or challenge this, because this is the law. All I'm going to say is that, yes, maybe in some cases this will be discouraging for some property owners to offer rent concession, but this is the law of our city. So the recommendation would be for the landlords to review the ordinance. It's always a good idea to, if you own a property, or if you are if you're planning to buy a property, purchase a property in the city of West Hollywood, just you need to understand that there are specific laws and maybe sometime, maybe even very strict rules and regulations that the landlords have to abide, and this is one of those. And having said that, I have no problem of supporting the staff's recommendation in this matter, affirming the hearing examiner's decision. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. The only, I guess, other comment that I will make was regarding the landlord's sort of claim that there was, some mispayments, et cetera. Because that wasn't before, or what was before the hearing examiner, that wasn't a part of their decision, I'm inclined to go with what the hearing examiner sort of calculated as that being the case. If there's some recourse or some missed payment, I would imagine that you would still be entitled to that, this notwithstanding. However, that evidence isn't before us, and so we can't overturn or reverse or change the decision without that before us. And so with that said, is there a motion regarding Resolution 23637?
I can make a motion, Chair. I make a motion to adopt Resolution of the Rent Stabilization Commission 23-637, a resolution of the Rent Stabilization Commission to affirm the hearing examiner's decision as to rent decrease application D-4772.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and we have a second. Madam Secretary, roll call, please.
Commissioner Bass,
Aye.
Commissioner Kerpes,
Aye.
Commissioner Martz,
Aye.
Commissioner Rory,
Aye.
Commissioner Topshin,
Aye.
Vice Chair Moore,
Aye.
Chair Wright.
Aye. All right, motion passes. I would like to thank the parties for coming in person this evening. If you have any questions, please reach out to the Rent Stabilization Division at 323-848-6450 or via email or online at weho.org to schedule an appointment. All righty, that closes out our appeals for this evening. Item number 9 on the agenda is new or unfinished business. There is none. Item number 10 are items from staff. Are there any other items from staff?
No items at this time, but I did want to say that it's been an honor to be here helping you guys out these past 2 weeks while John was away. I'm looking forward to our study session where I'll be present as well to help you guys out. Thank you.
And we also have the now the longest standing record of 2 POC folks running the meeting. Item number 11 is public comment. Are there any public comments this evening?
No speakers at this time.
No speakers. Item number 12 are items from commissioners. If there are items, feel free to jump in. I don't want to call on you if you don't have anything, so jump in. Yep.
A couple things. First of all, good job. It's great having you here. We'll miss you. One of the things I spoke to Ms. Natalizio about during the break was it sounds like, based upon all of our, many, not all, but many of our appeals, that landlords aren't understanding that they should be filing compliance determinations as soon as they fix something. Don't come here tell us that that they fixed it, but actually file it immediately. It would be in their benefit. And I think that there might be some things that staff might want to talk about regarding that because there might be some issues. But it'd be nice if we could get some clarification on how landlords are being told and if there's anything more we can do to encourage them to do that. The second thing was, I think Commissioner Mars said it really well tonight, and I just wanted to kind of make a point. I'm not going to be able to say it nearly as eloquently as I would like to say it, but the point about the significance of Costa-Hawkins on the laws and our rent stabilization ordinances it should be highlighted tonight. In this case, the case we just heard, because the reason why we have to stay so strong and make sure that we have very clear lines on rent increases is because of Costa-Hawkins. Costa-Hawkins does not allow us to the city to set rents under new tenancies. So it requires us to hold landlords accountable to, they're allowed to raise the rent however high they would like to on a new tenancy. But they can't, I'm not saying that they do this intentionally, but doing a special, it's almost like tricking a tenant in to come in under a lesser amount, hoping to then make more money in the future. And that would be fine if we didn't have these restrictions, if you didn't have a rent stabilized apartment, first of all. But we have to protect, as a city, we have to protect these units. And so we're only going to allow landlords to go up to market, just like the law allows, and then we're going to hold them to that. So it's not that we're pulling anything from landlords or hurting them in any way by not allowing them to do these specials. These specials are what Commissioner Martz mentioned earlier. That's the market. So they're extending their rights by doing that, and then we're just holding them to our ordinances. The last thing, and speaking on Costa-Hawkins, there will be a proposition on the ballot. It's the Justice for Renters Act that would not reverse, but eliminate Costa-Hawkins, basically. And so I would ask that we have an item on our agenda, future agenda, in the next, let's say, before the end of the year, to have consideration for this commission to consider that proposition and whether we would like to recommend to council whether the city should oppose or support or take a position on it. And if I have a majority of the commission to allow that for that discussion on a future agenda?
Absolutely.
And then that's all.
Yes.
Thank you.
So informative. Thank you so much for that. I don't have anything, and so with that, our meetings for this month are at an end. And so the meeting of the Rent Stabilization Commission is adjourned into our next regularly scheduled meeting on December 14th at 7 p.m. in the West Hollywood City Council chambers. Have a good night.